getting into it, you already mentioned it. The breakout players for this conference. I think first one I'll mention, I like Moses Moody. I think
Moses Moody.
what he was able to do in the playoffs with the limited time he had, gives you a lot of energy off that bench. I think he's a great spark plug. Not only that, the off ball movement I think is something that's really special with him because we know how deadly that can be in that offense. And I think when you're just looking at guys who, when we talk about the playoffs, we've always heard in interviews to where it could come down to like one loose ball, and if you're not the team that gets that, you lose the series. And I think Moses Moody is that kind of guy to where I would depend on him to create those winning plays, you know, high quality basketball, high quality IQ. I think all of that kind of encompasses Moses Moody. And, you know, when you're playing with Chris Paul, the game comes a lot easier. And I think Moses is going to be a guy that I think is really a big beneficiary of that. Just because, I think Kuminga's another one, obviously, you could talk about. But I think with Moses, I like how he's not just static when he's not getting the ball. He's always moving.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I think that's actually a sleeper pick. Honestly,
Big
we'll
sleeper.
say.
Who else you got?
But see, when I think about breakout players, I think about like Laurie Markkinen last year, for example. Obviously, coming into his own, coming out of the cocoon and turning into the
Mm,
player he is. So I think honestly, like this is not to say that he hasn't gotten to where he is, because I mean, looking at his stats from last year, he already is a player of his own. But I think with the first 25 games not having Ja, I think Desmond Bain is really going to come into his own.
yeah, I had
Uh,
him up there too.
yeah, I think he's going to obviously see a huge uptick in usage.
Yeah.
And I think it's not, I don't think it's necessarily going to stop. And I think it's going to be very beneficial for this team just because you're going to have like two. I almost think it's like going to be like the guard rotation similar to the two Jays at this point, which it already is to some degree, but Desmond Bain's not, Jalen Brown level. But I could see him, garnering a lot of like confidence through these 25 games and really becoming like more of a 24 point per game player versus a 21 point per game player. And that's good.
I was literally saying I think he'll average. I think comfortably, I can see him averaging 25 through this first stretch without Jaw.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a safe number. I mean, he finished the season at 21.5. I don't think that's a hot take, but I think it is like one of those things that people are going to like not notice because they're going to be a 14 and 11, 15 and 10 team, like somewhere in the middle of the pack. But I think he's gonna remain steady after the fact, just because he's like, undoubtedly one of the best shooters in the league right now.
No
And
doubt.
I just don't see why he couldn't be that second. I mean, he already is, but he can't be that second guy consistently.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like that's a big thing with Memphis where they say they need a second guy. I think Desmond's more than capable of that. And then just one thing I want to point to. I think even if he struggles in this first stretch, because, you know, you're going from being guarded by the team's second or third best defender to where you're garnering like a Mikal Bridges or Herb Jones, the premier defensive stopper on teams is dedicated to, you know, mucking up your night. But even if Desmond kind of struggles with being the main center of attention on the scouting report, once you're able to get a job back, once you're able to kind of revert back to where you were, I think that could really help just accelerate to where he's at. Because when you go from like a Mikal Bridges to getting guarded from a Cam Johnson, no respect to Cam, but
Yeah,
there's a certain kind of confidence you gain on top of that. So yeah, I think Desmond's a great pick for me. Uh, I'm gonna say Malik Monk. When I'm looking
mm,
at that squad, what he was able to do in the playoffs, the insane. I think it was what they each had at least 35 apiece with him and Fox in whatever game that was. But I think Malik is if I could put some money down, which I might later, I would put Malik Monk down to win six man of the year. I think just it's another year of getting into that
not Chris
system.
Paul.
Nah, cause I think as much as I'd love Chris Paul to be the six man, I feel like they're gonna start him
Okay,
just
okay.
based off of like the pedigree or whatever. But I mean Malik Monk, when you compare his stats to Malcolm Brogdon's from last year, It's not that far off. I think Brogdon was maybe 16, 17, and 5 with 3 assists. Monk was more like 15, 5, and 5 at some points. And I think
Hmm.
if you're able to get a little uptick, if he gets to the 18, maybe even the 20s, if you really want to be super optimistic, I think that's something that Malik's more than capable of. And I think just being another year in the system, understanding the tendencies of a Mike Brown coach team, and another guy again, Sasha Vezenkov, when he comes to there, it's just going to open up the floor for him more and more. And I think if you have him, Kevin Herter and Sasha all on the floor together, I think Malik's is going to have a lot of room to operate in, and I think that's going to contribute to him getting a lot of opportunity to really like have a bigger impact on a game.
Okay.
So
I
not like
like
a
that pick.
crazy breakout, but I think he can take like a big step into where his role is now.
Right. And I think he's just maturing in the league now. Like I think you've seen flashes of him being a very like serviceable player.
Mm.
And I think being in this specific situation, like I think he is gracefully like, accepted this expand role like how he played last year and he
Yeah,
went crazy even went crazy in the playoffs, obviously. Um so I think I do see like that being kind of the case for them. Um I mean, another person I think I personally have, and I think it's just more out of hope than, speaking the truth. But I think I have John Collins seeing,
okay,
a resurgence. And I don't think it's like a breakout for him per se, because he's obviously been like, I mean, prior to DeJounte Murray, that second option in Atlanta for a while
yeah,
now. And coming to the Utah Jazz team that's sort of just raw and still figuring out their lineups here. I mean, me personally, I don't see a lot happening for Colin Sexton. I'm not trying to, say this man's career is over by any means, but
oh, man, I remember last year I was like, if there's a guy I want in fantasy this year for sure, it was Colin Sexton, and
I picked him, and I mean he's still gonna play around, but like I could see them very much, bringing in their younger guys to like
yeah,
work around like getting them better, like Keontae George. And I mean, keep in mind, I think Taylor Hendricks is gonna get a lot of burn too. I think John
I was
Collins
gonna
is
say,
gonna.
yeah,
Yeah, but I think John Collins, if he can really prove it, which I think he wants to, I think he could have not a Laurie Markkinen year, but I think he could get back to being a 20-point per game player like this season.
whew, I like the
But
optimism. Yeah, I'm a big John Collins
yeah,
guy. Yeah, I
yeah,
like that
and
pick
yeah, I mean he's a player that does a little bit of everything, Like
for sure.
my opinion, I wouldn't compare it completely, but he gives me Tobias Harris vibes. He's a cool 20,
He's a
Yeah,
cool 20 before his thumb got fucked up or whatever it was.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
He,
I like the idea of him going to Utah and getting a fresh start. I
yeah.
am personally a guy where I would prefer Taylor Hendricks, but I think that's the thing with John Collins. When you look at just to make an observation, who knows if I'm right about this. When you look at like when he was in Atlanta, there was never really a threat of him losing his starting job, I feel. There might have been a couple times where like, oh, you're seeing AJ Griffin start to come into his own, you're seeing DeAndre Hunter still being effective in his role to where you're seeing a little bit of glimmer of like it might be over. But
Yeah,
he's never really, even from day one. Let me make sure I'm not just talking out my ass here, but it just has that feeling that that's always kind of been a guarantee. Like as much as as Trey Young is Atlanta's point guard, he was always like gonna be Atlanta's power forward. And when you're looking at here, yeah, outside of his rookie year, he's only come off the bench for 3 games. And again, that excludes his rookie year where you pay your dues or whatever it is. So I think he's been used to getting minutes, and now that you're gonna kind of be pushed into this fight or flight mode, that could it can make you or break you. So I like the
yeah,
opportunity for him. I think it's a good thing for both him and Taylor Hendricks. And man, Utah's a team I can think if there's another sleeper, I would put them in there.
yeah. I think that's a good statement.
Yeah. Next team I'm gonna or next player I'm gonna mention, I think Devin Vassell. Last year was already
Mm,
kind of the beginning of an indication that he's ready to break out, but I think a year, hopefully he's fully healthy, where you're able just to again impose your will on the game. You're able to get to your spots. You know, he's a Chris Middleton type of player, which you know how I be with those types of guys. And I think just again, he's able to get to his spots, and when you equate that to the fact that he's gonna have a guy like Wemby, who even if he's not like doesn't have it going offensively, he's gonna garner a lot of the gravity. And I think Devin Vassell is going to be able to take advantage of that. And playing alongside a smart point guard in Trey Jones, I think Devin's just in the perfect situation to be that number two guy, to be, you know, not the give it to me last shot of the game or whatever it is, but he's going to help you get over the hump for sure.
yeah, and I think the other thing, the obvious thing maybe is just that now that San Antonio has obviously garnered the pick of maybe the century,
Mm-hmm.
you know, quote unquote. Like I think they're at a point now, obviously, where they're playing to play. They're not going to be bullshitting anymore for a season. So I think this is where you really start seeing players starting to improve amongst each other. I think having obviously Wemby is going to cause the other players on that team to want to play at that level or at least feel at that level.
Mm.
So you could even throw names like Kelton Johnson into that mix, even
Oh
though
yeah.
he's come into his own already. Like in the last season, like I think he's gonna have or feel like he's gonna have something to prove.
I think him and
At least
Sohan are like the perfect, like those three alone, I think are perfect
yeah,
complementaries to Wemby.
exactly. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't have any more guys. Like, I mean, I do have a few more guys, but these are more so like the stars on my list,
Okay.
like that I think are just going to basically, you know, not like necessarily, become that much better, but be those players this season.
Yeah, throw them
I had
out, and
three.
then if anything, we'll talk about a little bit, and then we can get into like the rookies.
Yeah, I would say okay. Well, I think the obvious one, in my opinion, is Anthony Edwards. Uh, I think he's already pretty much in the last season showed that he's going to be that guy in this conference. I personally have this idea, and I think it's going to happen that Timberwolves are going to make a midseason move. They've just taken too much shit to like not be able to like ride this team out any longer. Like I think they're gonna be the type of team that like lets this experiment for maybe just the half the season and make a trade somewhere down the line. So
Mm.
I think Anthony Edwards is they're going to commit obviously on him. I think that's the one thing.
Do you
And
think
then
Ant
I think
can?
they're going to
Sorry to cut you off. Do you think Ant can
yeah,
average 30 this year? Think you
that's
can
what
you
like
can get up to that?
that's what I mean. Like I think they get rid of one player and he ends up finishing like yeah, like averaging like close to 30. I think that's where my head is right now. I think that obviously those things have to happen, but I just don't see them holding on to both Cat and Rudy Gobert. I mean, unless they want to be like playing in mediocrity forever. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on too long about that one. I think this is like another like crazy pick. I think I was smoking something when I wrote this down, but I think Zion is gonna do
Okay, okay, yeah. Unless that
like
motherfucker gets on the court, we'll see. Who's the? Do you say you had three?
yeah.
Who's the
I mean,
last one?
I think okay, here's the thing. This other guy, like I just think is going to I can't even rationalize this one. Maybe this one just came from some sort of intuition. And I think I say that because when you already look at how he's doing, he's not gonna have like that much crazier of an uptick. But I think De'Aaron Fox is going to like show up this season. And I think it's because they're gonna
Ooh,
want to be
just
that team
continue.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be on a tear. And I think it's because he's played one season without Tyrese Halliburton, but I think he's finally figured it out with Domantas Sabonis. And now I think they really start making a move. Like I wouldn't say it's the worst to compare them to like where Jokic and Jamal Murray were at few seasons before the last season, you know. I think he's gonna want to continue to play to that like potential he has. Like I don't think he's necessarily reached his ceiling,
Mm,
but
yeah, good point.
I yeah,
I mean, I think
no, go on, go on.
one thing I would just add is you saw how when he came into the league, he wasn't so much, there wasn't as much of a willingness to stretch the floor and to, shoot the three. And now, obviously, the past few years, he started to ramp up a bit on that. I mean, we saw how I think it was a playoff game where he hit like five threes or something like that. But if he's able to even get to like, doesn't have to be like a crazy 40% or anything like that. But if he's able to average like a respectable 35% on like five or so attempts, I think he can continue to grow his game, and then all of that will just make everything else come even easier. So pause, but
Yeah,
I like that pick. Yeah, I think he's just going to continue to
yeah,
build off of last year and be a tear for sure.
yeah. And really this list of superstars or quote unquote like soon to be superstars maybe is that like I think these are just players that are waiting to like really have their season. I don't think Zion has had his season, and maybe he won't ever. But I'm high on Zion. De'Aaron Fox, I think maybe didn't get like the biggest like recognition, but obviously he had a good season last season. But I think he just hasn't had that season. The same with Anthony Edwards, and I think it's just because of their situations. But I
Mm.
do believe for all three of these players, their situations could like turn around,
I think they could
especially Zion.
become like center pieces and center talking points in the
Just in the
game of
NBA.
basketball. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
All